The moment my mother shoved me out of my own office, the entire room froze. My chest slammed against the polished oak doorframe, the sting of betrayal sharper than any slap I had ever felt. Laughter and whispers erupted from the staff behind me, their faces masks of shock, curiosity, and cruel amusement, all at my expense. Humiliation clawed at my throat like fire, hot and suffocating, and I realized in that second that everything I had built, every careful step, every sleepless night was being stripped away in front of an audience of the people I had trusted most. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and share. Your support keeps the stories coming. I straightened my shoulders, ignoring the heat rising to my cheeks, and stepped into the corridor with every ounce of calm I could summon. My heels clicked against the marble floor, echoing off the walls like a countdown to some unspoken reckoning. The security guard at the door looked between my mother and me, uncertain if he should intervene, but the moment passed. No one moved. My mother, the woman who had built this company from scratch with iron fists and an unrelenting hunger, now wore a smug, triumphant smile. Her eyes glimmered with the satisfaction of someone who believed they had finally won. She thought she had toppled me. The irony burned me from the inside out. Every meeting I had chaired, every strategic decision I had executed, every innovation I had quietly implemented while she took the credit, everything had led to this absurdly humiliating moment. For 15 years I had been underestimated, mocked, and publicly ignored, yet I had quietly become indispensable. I had been the pulse of this company, its silent engine, the one who ensured it functioned while my mother basked in the spotlight. And now she thought a single shove could erase years of effort. I walked past my team, catching their eyes as if daring them to underestimate me further. Some avoided my gaze, their fear palpable, their loyalty caught in the crossfire of humiliation and survival. Others smirked, tasting the spectacle of my downfall, convinced that my calm exit signaled surrender. The absurdity of it made my blood boil, but I refused to react. They did not yet know that the seeds of chaos were already planted. I had seen this coming, predicted it, and now I had the perfect stage for what was coming next. As I reached the lobby, the receptionist dared to glance up. "Tinsley?" Her voice trembled, caught between apology, awe, and confusion. I nodded once, politely, like a queen ignoring pawns. Outside, the cold January wind hit me with a sharp clarity. I inhaled deeply, the freezing air burning my lungs, and for a moment I allowed myself a private thrill, the first taste of silent victory. I did not argue, I did not retaliate, I simply left, because power had never been about confrontation, it had been about control, and I had it where it mattered most, behind the scenes, unseen and untouchable. Back inside, the first murmurs of panic began. Phones rang unanswered, printers jammed, emails piled up, reports went unchecked. Every department that had once run like clockwork was now faltering. My mother leaned on her desk, triumphant moments ago, but her confident smile faltered the second she faced the first error, a critical miscalculation in accounts payable. Panic flickered behind her eyes, betraying her carefully maintained composure. The truth I had always known was revealed in the quiet chaos. The empire she thought she ruled was tethered entirely to me. By evening, the panic had spread. Whispers of mismanagement reached board members, clients began sending urgent inquiries, and staff scrambled in confusion. My mother made call after call, her voice strained with frustration, trying to salvage what she had assumed would run seamlessly without me. She had always underestimated my contributions, assuming that my work was easily replaceable. I watched from the safe distance of my apartment, quietly observing the unraveling of a world built on the illusion that she was indispensable. I did not sleep that night, but it was not anger that kept me awake. It was satisfaction, precision, and quiet planning. I reviewed financial reports, examined the cascading mistakes, traced the inefficiencies, and silently smiled at every problem my absence had revealed. The mistakes were not accidents, they were proof of how deeply my efforts had permeated every aspect of the company. My invisible labor, long overlooked, was now impossible to ignore. Every misstep, every flustered phone call, every email sent in panic would become a testament to the mistake they had made in pushing me out. The first text arrived just after midnight. One line, "We need you back, please." I smiled faintly, but did not respond. Soon a second text followed, then another. Calls came in, all frantic, each more desperate than the last. The irony was intoxicating. Those who had mocked me, dismissed me, and even laughed at my expulsion were now realizing with each passing hour the gravity of their error. I let the suspense build, let them twist in the reality they never imagined, that the backbone of their success had been walking among them all along. The next morning, the first cracks in their facade became undeniable. Staff members wandered through the office, lost without guidance. Meetings were missed, client presentations faltered, decisions remained unmade. Panic, confusion, and fear spread like wildfire. And then, as if scripted, a critical client arrived unexpectedly. My mother, who had believed she could impress, negotiate, and maintain control, froze in the hallway, her expression the perfect blend of shock and panic. She realized, painfully, that she could not handle this without me. Her world, once a fortress of authority, had become a house of cards overnight. I watched her, standing across the street, the city skyline behind me catching the early sun. I did not call, I did not intervene. The scene played out like a slow-motion reckoning, her empire crumbling under her feet, and all because she thought she could erase the person who made it possible. The humiliation I had endured for so long was now mirrored in her expression. She had sought to dominate me, and yet she was powerless without me. My phone buzzed again. The moment my mother shoved me out of my own office, the entire room froze. My chest slammed against the polished oak doorframe, the sting of betrayal sharper than any slap I had ever felt. Laughter and whispers erupted from the staff behind me, their faces masks of shock, curiosity, and cruel amusement, all at my expense. Humiliation clawed at my throat like fire, hot and suffocating, and I realized in that second that everything I had built, every careful step, every sleepless night was being stripped away in front of an audience of the people I had trusted most. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and share. Your support keeps the stories coming. I straightened my shoulders, ignoring the heat rising to my cheeks, and stepped into the corridor with every ounce of calm I could summon. My heels clicked against the marble floor, echoing off the walls like a countdown to some unspoken reckoning. The security guard at the door looked between my mother and me, uncertain if he should intervene, but the moment passed. No one moved. My mother, the woman who had built this company from scratch with iron fists and an unrelenting hunger, now wore a smug, triumphant smile. Her eyes glimmered with the satisfaction of someone who believed they had finally won. She thought she had toppled me. The irony burned me from the inside out. Every meeting I had chaired, every strategic decision I had executed, every innovation I had quietly implemented while she took the credit, everything had led to this absurdly humiliating moment. For 15 years I had been underestimated, mocked, and publicly ignored, yet I had quietly become indispensable. I had been the pulse of this company, its silent engine, the one who ensured it functioned while my mother basked in the spotlight. And now she thought a single shove could erase years of effort. I walked past my team, catching their eyes as if daring them to underestimate me further. Some avoided my gaze, their fear palpable, their loyalty caught in the crossfire of humiliation and survival. Others smirked, tasting the spectacle of my downfall, convinced that my calm exit signaled surrender. The absurdity of it made my blood boil, but I refused to react. They did not yet know that the seeds of chaos were already planted. I had seen this coming, predicted it, and now I had the perfect stage for what was coming next. As I reached the lobby, the receptionist dared to glance up. "Tinsley?" Her voice trembled, caught between apology, awe, and confusion. I nodded once, politely, like a queen ignoring pawns. Outside, the cold January wind hit me with a sharp clarity. I inhaled deeply, the freezing air burning my lungs, and for a moment I allowed myself a private thrill, the first taste of silent victory. I did not argue, I did not retaliate, I simply left, because power had never been about confrontation, it had been about control, and I had it where it mattered most, behind the scenes, unseen and untouchable. Back inside, the first murmurs of panic began. Phones rang unanswered, printers jammed, emails piled. I lingered just across the street, my coffee cooling in my hand, my eyes scanning the chaos like a conductor observing a symphony of panic. Every misstep, every flustered glance, every uncertain nod was confirmation. Years of invisible labor, of silent precision, of strategy executed without fanfare had built the backbone of this company. And now, without me at the helm, that backbone had snapped. It was almost too easy. The first email I received that morning was from a longtime client, one who had always relied on me directly for decisions and guidance. "Tinsley, something is off. We are losing direction. Please call." The words were frantic but polite, tinged with confusion and fear. I let the notification blink unread. Every unanswered call, every delayed email was another testament to the mistake my family and staff had made. They had mocked me publicly yesterday, and today, the mirror of my absence reflected their incompetence perfectly. I watched as my mother paced the executive suite like a caged animal, her phone pressed to her ear. She barked instructions, corrected misstatements, attempted damage control, but it was futile. Without me, no one could coordinate, no one could anticipate problems, and no one could manage the delicate balance of egos and operations that I had quietly maintained for years. She had tried to erase me, and now she was discovering that the company I had built inside her empire could not function without the architect herself. The first panic among the staff was subtle. A manager miscommunicated a shipment deadline, creating confusion with a high-profile client. A department head attempted to authorize a budget adjustment without consulting the necessary teams, and the result was chaos. Every small miscalculation, every missed step, compounded exponentially. My mother's face fell when the first complaints reached her, her confident facade cracking under pressure. She realized, finally, what she had tried to dismiss for so long. I was the axis upon which this company turned. I stayed silent, observing. I did not answer calls, did not return emails, did not intervene. My power lay in absence, and the full weight of it was beginning to hit every person in that building. I could almost hear the collective panic vibrating through the walls, the subtle tremor in voices that had once spoken over me with arrogance. By mid-afternoon, whispers of financial errors began to circulate. A junior accountant, usually unflappable, made a critical oversight that caused minor but alarming discrepancies in reporting. The CFO, usually confident and precise, looked to my mother for guidance, but guidance was useless without the one who understood the nuances of every operation. The cracks spread like a virus, infecting every layer of the organization. Panic had replaced routine. Confidence had evaporated. The illusion of competence my family had taken for granted had vanished overnight. I allowed myself a small, private smile. This was the consequence of arrogance and underestimation, the same forces I had endured for years. And yet, the sweetest part of it all was the anticipation of the revelation to come. I had worked in silence, had built systems, earned loyalty quietly, and now the world would see exactly how indispensable I had been. By evening, the first official messages came directly from board members. "We are concerned about operational stability," one wrote. "Immediate intervention required," said another. My mother's phone buzzed incessantly, each notification a drumbeat of recognition that her empire had been hollow without me. I did not respond to any of them, allowing her to flounder, allowing the company to wobble as if the absence of one person could tilt the scale of fortune entirely, because that was exactly what it could do. The climax of chaos arrived just as the sun dipped toward the horizon. A critical investor, someone with a direct line to the board and immense sway over future funding, appeared unannounced at the building. The meeting had been scheduled with me specifically, yet my mother, desperate and overconfident, attempted to step in. The investor's first words were sharp and disbelieving. "Where is Tinsley?" There was no hiding the tension, no smoothing over the gap I had left. The employees faltered, stammered, shuffled papers, and muttered excuses that rang hollow. My mother's carefully maintained confidence crumbled visibly. At that moment, I stepped back to the sidewalk, feeling the cold air on my face, the wind tugging at my hair, and I realized something I had known for a long time. Power is only real when it is recognized by those who depend on it. Yesterday, I had been humiliated in front of my staff. Today, the humiliation had shifted entirely to those who had orchestrated my downfall, and the irony was almost deliciously poetic. I had never sought vengeance in the traditional sense. I had not sent angry messages or confronted anyone with fury. My strategy was far subtler. I had let the company reveal the truth on its own, the truth that I had long been the linchpin, the driving force, the hidden engine. Every staff member who had doubted me, every colleague who had mocked me, every family member who had taken my efforts for granted would now see it, painfully, in real time. By nightfall, the office had descended into organized chaos. Reports were missing, calls went unanswered, and critical deadlines were teetering on the edge of disaster. My mother, who had smiled so confidently in the morning, now sat rigid in the boardroom, staring at her phone with an expression I had never seen on her before: fear. The final, most devastating blow of the day arrived in the form of a single text from my assistant. "We cannot fix this. The clients are calling. They want you." And in that moment, the full weight of my absence was undeniable. The very people who had mocked me, humiliated me, and tried to erase me were now forced to confront a simple, unavoidable truth. Without Tinsley, nothing ran. I watched them flounder, my pulse steady, my mind already calculating the steps I would take when I finally returned. But I did not move. I did not answer the texts or calls. I let them twist, let them feel the panic I had endured for years. They would beg, they would plead, they would realize their mistake, but only when I chose to make it known. As the city lights began to twinkle below me, a sudden thought hit me. The real test would not be their desperation, it would be my terms. For too long, I had been underestimated, treated as replaceable, dismissed as subordinate. Today, that illusion had shattered. But tomorrow, when I returned, it would be on my conditions, my authority, and my way. And then, through the darkened glass of the boardroom, I saw it, the moment that would define everything. My mother, once poised and commanding, now frozen, realizing the empire she claimed belonged to me, that her authority was meaningless without the force she had tried to suppress. And at that instant, I knew the climax of this silent reckoning was almost here. The next morning, the office was eerily silent, a stark contrast to the chaos of the day before. Phones still rang unanswered, emails piled up in digital heaps, and the staff wandered through hallways as though searching for the ghost of guidance they had always taken for granted. My mother had arrived early, her heels clicking against the marble, but the confident air she usually carried had vanished. She glanced at every corner, every desk, every employee with the unmistakable sheen of panic in her eyes. I stood across the street, watching. The sunlight glinted off the glass facade, catching my reflection for a brief moment, and I felt a thrill unlike anything I had experienced before. This was the moment I had waited for, the precise moment where silent preparation, invisible effort, and relentless dedication converged into a reckoning they could not ignore. My mother had pushed me out, humiliated me, and now the world she thought she controlled was collapsing without me. My phone buzzed. Another text from my assistant. "We are losing critical clients. They demand you, now." I did not respond immediately. I let the seconds stretch, letting the tension pull tight like a drawn bowstring. The anxiety in the office was palpable, almost visible through the glass windows. The employees who laughed at my departure now were pale, whispering among themselves, eyes darting as they realized the magnitude of the mistake they had made. Finally, I entered the building. My heels clicked in deliberate rhythm, announcing my return without a single word spoken. The receptionist, usually so composed, froze mid-motion, her eyes widening in recognition. I walked past her, past the open office doors where my mother tried to regain composure, and into the heart of the chaos. The silence fell like a physical weight, every head turning towards me. For a split second, the room held its collective breath. My mother's face paled, the carefully constructed facade of authority crumbling visibly. "Tinsley," she began, but the single word was powerless. Then my mother stepped forward, her voice trembling but controlled. "Tinsley, she paused, struggling for words. The truth was clear in her eyes. She had underestimated me, dismissed me, and now she was powerless. "We need you back," she finished, almost as if she were begging. I finally spoke, calm, deliberate, and unwavering. "I am here," I said, "but on my terms." The words struck the room like a bell, clear and final. Every staff member, every board member, every employee who had questioned me understood that the balance of power had shifted irreversibly. I had returned not as a subordinate, not as someone to be dismissed, but as the force that held the company together, the authority they could no longer ignore. The first meeting of the day was with the executive team. The room, which had been a theater of chaos the day before, now felt contained, deliberate, and purposeful under my direction. I addressed each crisis methodically, correcting errors, delegating responsibilities, and realigning priorities. Every motion was precise, each decision decisive. By the time the critical clients arrived, everything was under control. Their calls, once frantic, were now met with confidence, professionalism, and solutions. The narrative had reversed completely. By midday, the office buzzed with a new energy, a mix of awe, respect, and cautious relief. My mother, standing slightly behind me, had receded into the background. She had learned the lesson of power and humility in one short, catastrophic day. Staff members who had mocked, ignored, or underestimated me approached with renewed respect, offering updates and insights, seeking guidance rather than imposing judgment. The reversal was complete, and the authority I had always earned but never fully received was now undisputed. Later that afternoon, the board convened in the conference room. My mother was present, but her usual dominating presence was subdued. For the first time, she listened. I presented solutions, outlined strategies, and took control of future operations. Every point was met with nods, every recommendation with agreement. The realization was visible. The company could not thrive without me, and recognition of that fact had shifted every dynamic in the room. But the real victory was not just operational, it was emotional. Years of underestimation, of silent work unacknowledged, of public humiliation were now transformed into undeniable proof of my worth. The staff who had laughed, the colleagues who had questioned, even my own mother, their understanding of my contributions could not be erased. I had endured their arrogance, their mockery, their dismissal, and emerged not only intact, but in full command, respected and feared in equal measure. By evening, the office had regained its rhythm, efficiency restored, and confidence rebuilt. Clients were reassured, deadlines met, and the staff now operated with clarity and trust. My mother approached me quietly, a rare vulnerability in her eyes. "Tinsley," she said softly, "I underestimated you." I nodded once, acknowledging her admission, but said nothing further. Actions had spoken louder than words. The humiliation of yesterday had reversed, and today dignity and authority were mine alone. As I prepared to leave for the night, I looked over the office one last time. The transformation was complete. Panic had become order, desperation had become respect, and the silent success I had cultivated for years had finally been recognized. My mother and the staff had learned a lesson in humility, dependence, and the true weight of unseen effort. I had reclaimed not just my office, but my power, my pride, and my place as the undeniable force at the heart of the company. And in that moment, as the city lights flickered on and the office settled into calm efficiency, I understood a truth I had always known. Power, respect, and authority are never given. They are recognized, demanded, and when necessary, earned silently until the world has no choice but to acknowledge them. I stepped out into the night, leaving the office behind, a quiet smile on my lips. They had pushed me out, humiliated me, and underestimated me. They had witnessed the cost of their arrogance. And now I walked forward with the satisfaction of victory fully realized, knowing that no one would ever doubt my value again.